Virtual Museum.
Hi there, I'm Mallard, and I'll be your virtual museum tour guide for today. What you're about to witness on this tour is the moment that changed everything. When the course of human history shifted towards the utopia that we live in today. The year is 2016, and Sony just released the PlayStation VR.
PlayStation VR is a weird kind of anomaly.
I'm happy to announce that on October 13th, PlayStation VR will make its debut.
I remember it being revealed and being quite surprised.
Sony decided to use their older technology that they invented for the PlayStation 3.
That's like the best way to describe it. It's just a really interesting way to get VR to work for a console.
Nowadays, virtual reality has become pretty accessible to everyone. Most electronic or tech stores usually have standalone headsets available. VR games from big developers and franchises are coming out regularly and get very positive reception. More and more PCs can run complex VR games. Hell, even your phone can be turned into a low-budget VR headset. Virtual reality wasn't always this accessible though. In fact, it was pretty recently that this all changed. Dude, I remember when these things were so incredibly expensive.
You're looking at $1,776 plus the $650 for the Oculus Rift. If you go with the HTC Vive, it's around $830. So as you can see, this system isn't specifically with any kind of budget in mind, and it's certainly a little bit pricey.
Almost no one had the hardware necessary to properly run it, and on top of that, not a lot of people were even making games for it.
This thing is $17 right now.
VR was niche and inaccessible. It seemed like a far-off dream at the time.
At that point, VR headsets were all pretty expensive. It was quite a high investment thing to get into.
Oh my gosh, the Rift S was such a pain in the butt back then. The Oculus software, oh my gosh, it was just always falling apart, and sometimes it would take me like 20 or 30 minutes just to get it working and going into VR. The other thing is there was this weird bug with the Rift S headset where in the middle of playing VR, your voice would turn into like a robotic, just bass boosted, the most ear screeching sounds ever.
So this is my Oculus mic, and the mic's on button.
I still have no idea why that happened, but thankfully, long since any situations like that have come across.
In comes Sony, who has a crazy idea that might just work. Suddenly, one of the biggest companies in gaming was going all in on VR. Instead of needing a powerful $2,000 PC and a $1,000 headset, you now just needed a PS4. A system that a lot of people interested in games already owned. The headset itself was relatively cheap too, coming in at only $400. And with a company that had so many resources like Sony, there were finally big budget VR games coming out regularly. On paper, this strategy is genius. So many people wanted to try or own a VR headset, but it just wasn't very realistic or even that worth it.
Oh my god, Rift, what are you doing? It's like my HDMI cable keeps coming out of my Rift.
PlayStation VR really was that first accessible and somewhat affordable headset on the market. The average consumer could finally experience VR in their own home. Dude, I remember being so impressed and excited at the time. I thought this was genius.
Obviously with PS4, it's a peripheral on top of that hardware cost. But it felt accessible. It felt like the first accessible headset. My first impression was pretty excited.
And Sony really tried to give this thing the budget and support that it craved. Over 500 games were released for what is essentially an add-on. That is more games than the entirety of the N64 library. And they aren't small games either. Astro, for example, had his first big game release on the PlayStation VR. Beat Saber launched on it. The newest and eagerly anticipated Resident Evil game was made entirely playable in VR for it. Until Dawn got a VR spin-off game. Psychonauts had its first game release on it in 11 years. Doom got an exclusive VR spin-off game, and they even ported Doom 3 to it for some reason. Why Doom 3? That's a weird choice. Sony made a game that was meant to feel like you were playing a big action movie, with a budget that was at the time the biggest any VR game had ever received. Skyrim, Minecraft, No Man's Sky, and so many more games became playable in VR. Sony showed a more casual market that the technology for VR games was beginning to become a reality, and invited everyone to come along. Except you. You're not invited. You're not Batman, I can tell. This is where I remember a lot of people starting to get really excited about the possibilities and future of virtual reality. PlayStation VR just felt like that first big moment when big companies in the industry started to think more seriously about VR development. It must have been just as exciting for them that finally an affordable VR headset was released that already had somewhat of an install base due to it being released for one of the best-selling consoles of all time. Could you, introduce yourself?
My name is Linnea Harrison, and I am the CEO of Neat Corporation.
Neat Corporation were the creators of Budget Cuts, one of my favorite games on the PSVR. Linnea was kind enough to let me interview her for this video. You'll see her pop up a bunch throughout the rest of the video, and I want to sincerely thank her for her time. She gave me a bunch of incredible insight into VR development and what developing for the PlayStation VR was like.
We definitely saw it as a huge opportunity to have a lot more normal gamer players, if we call them that, because the people who have, especially back then, desktop computers that were VR capable, it was very, very few. That was people who spend a lot of money just on their computers and then even more money on a headset, and it's just, that is what they love, that is what they do 100%. But that's not a lot of people, and they have they're all very similar in their tastes and their preferences for what type of game they want. Whereas we were seeing a lot of the PlayStation players, people who have the PlayStation, the PS4, they have families maybe, or they are a couple, or they have friends over and they like to socially game. And so it really the way we were looking at it was a large expansion to see okay, we think self being the spy sneaking around da 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 is cool. Is everybody else going to think that, or is it just niche gamers? It really was a wonderful way to see much more normal gamers approach budget cuts.
PSVR is also the only line of VR consoles to have ever released that supports physical games, making this platform incredibly interesting for video game collectors. It's very likely to me that no other VR platform will ever support them again. You would either need to have a cartridge slot on the headset to put games in, which isn't a great option since cartridges are expensive to make, plus they generally hold less data than discs. Or you would need the headset to be wired to a system that plays discs, which also isn't ideal. Speaking of which, the PlayStation VR really is a product of its time because almost every part of the system is a little it's a little clunky. This headset causes a headache before you've even put the damn thing on. Look at all the setup you have to do for this thing to even work.
Disconnect the HDMI cable, plug it into the back of the processor unit. Take the PSVR HDMI cable, use that to connect the processor unit. You'll also need to connect them with the USB cable, plugging one end into the PS4, the other end into the back of the processor unit. Slide back the front right side of the processor unit, plug them in, then slide the cover back. The other end plugs into the VR headset's cord labeled number 5. Connect the AC power cord to the AC adapter. Plug the other end of the AC adapter into the back of the processor unit and the free end of the AC power cord into your favorite wall outlet.
Yo, what is up, people? Welcome to another ranking video. Today we're going to be ranking my favorite wall outlets. Starting with this one, this is the outlet in my bathroom. Absolute classic, one of my favorites even. It's going in S tier.
You have to plug in so much stuff. I don't even remember the setup, and I only did this a couple years ago, but there's like 2 or 3 different things that you have to plug into the wall.
And I remember my first time doing it, I had to follow a YouTube tutorial because there's just so many different ones. There's like 3 HDMIs you have to plug in.
And it doesn't even work that well. Like, it works, but if you get too far away from the sensors, it just completely breaks everything.
Yeah, that's one limitation of the first PSVR. As great as it is, you can feel like they kind of cheated some parts of it to make it work.
It's just such a headache, dude, with like 1,000 cables, and then you get the camera in there, and then... Wait, I haven't even talked about the camera yet. If you've ever wondered why the PlayStation VR has these blue lights on it, it's so that this camera can track your movement. That doesn't just apply to the headset either. Introducing the PlayStation Move controllers. Oh wait, why am I even introducing these things? They were already pretty old by the time that the PlayStation VR released. That's because the Move controllers are from the PS3 generation. They were more or less made as just Sony's answer to the Wii. People just quickly forgot about them, myself included, by the way. They were never that well received, and very few games even supported them. I used to go to a flea market every Sunday, and I remember there being stacks and stacks of these things in box for like 10 euros a piece. Like, nobody wanted these things. It's like if Nintendo made a VR headset that needed the Wii Motion Plus controllers to work. Lots of games on the PlayStation VR are still playable with a regular DualShock, but a good chunk of the library requires the Move controllers. Just like the headset, they light up so that the camera can track their movement. But unlike the headset, they do kinda tend to lose tracking every once in a while. Especially when you're turned around. The headset has these lights on the back that can still track your movement when you're faced away from the camera. But when turned around, your body and arms tend to block out the light from the Move controllers. What absolutely kills these controllers though is that they don't have an analog stick. It's the reason why some games still only support the DualShock. As cute as it is that Sony found a way to repurpose these controllers, they were never made for virtual reality.
When I got it, I was expecting to also get like controllers for the VR headset, but no, you have to have like literal Move controllers, which infamously don't work that well. I'm like, okay, I guess we'll see how it works.
Because it's forward cameras, or like forward tracking from the TV, it's really difficult to turn around and do stuff facing the other direction.
I mean, they started on PS3, right? So they naturally came over. I had some from the PS3 days. And it kind of felt like they were cheating their way through, sort of using what they had rather than trying to bundle more controllers into the cost of the system.
It's a really weird mishmash of like reusing like old stuff for VR.
And then it's also really difficult when your hand is really close to the headset because you don't see the lights as well. So the throwing of knives, super tricky to figure out for PSVR.
They're definitely not ideal. I played it with some games like Everybody's Golf VR. They fit in pretty naturally as just a golf club, like kind of like a Wii Remote would in Wii Sports. But when you get to like using them as hands, like that's when they start to feel weird because you use like Quest controllers and they fit into the palm of your hands. PSVR 1, it feels like you're just waving Wii remotes around. It's not exactly a natural fit.
We actually went back and forth a little bit with the devs over in on PlayStation just to like tweak and figure out how they were doing updates in different sections of where you were holding the controllers, and the same thing for bow and arrow, because usually if you're doing bow and arrow, you're going like this. And that was for Budget Cuts 2 when we were working on that with the bow and arrow mechanic. And one of the controllers would literally block the other one, which would then block your face.
There was also this blaster accessory released that did have an analog stick, but not a lot of games ended up using it. Let me be clear here, this whole system is an incredibly flawed one, but I do kinda like how much extra personality it ended up giving the PlayStation VR. This console just feels like a time capsule of where virtual reality was in the mid-2010s. The headset itself is really comfortable too. In fact, I think it's more comfortable than a lot of VR headsets are nowadays. This ring system is lovely and feels firm, unlike the flimsy straps on something like the Quest. More on that later. But what I've always thought was the best thing about the PSVR is just how social it is. Even if you're not playing it yourself, it's so much fun to just look at someone else playing it. The headset displays what the person is playing sees on the TV. Screaming at your friends during a horror game to look out or being on the edge of your seat as you watch someone get through a level in Superhot has a different feeling to it when you have the person in front of you in a headset. It makes you really crave having a PSVR for yourself. At least that's what it did to me, because I bought the PSVR shortly after having this exact experience at someone's house.
That was kind of the beauty of it, though, is you could put it on the TV and people can see what you're doing.
Oh, I have great memories with PSVR.
I remember my wife and we checked out PSVR at MCM London, which is a convention center.
Remember, Carl was over the whole day, and we were trying out a bunch of the VR games. There was some shooting game.
I was watching her play Astro for the first time before it came out. And just sort of seeing, like, I was just watching her move around. Like, it looked so silly, but then watching what happened on the TV was really cool.
But then we got Superhot VR, and we literally played it for like 6 hours. Like, we were addicted to it. Even though it didn't work that well, it was so much fun. It was just, like, again, an incredibly immersive experience.
And just seeing her lean around corners and things, it felt... It's like you're looking into a window of someone else playing, looking through their eyes, and that was really, really awesome.
This is an incredibly accessible headset for nearly everyone. But like I said before, it is a wired system, which at the time was pretty standard, but nowadays can feel a little outdated. I was always aware of its presence as I was playing, because it gets in the way a lot as you're moving around. The screen resolution is also very of the time. It's not terrible, and it actually looks a lot worse in the recording, because the recording uses a zoomed in version of what you see in your right eye. Take the footage you see throughout this video with a grain of salt. It's far from unplayable. You get used to it pretty quickly. What matters at the end of the day are the games, and that's this thing's strong suit. Because honestly, the PlayStation VR library is killer! So let's take a look at a few of them, before we move on to talk about the other headset.
Hey, are you coming?
Yeah, just gotta find something to wear. Do people even know that Astrobot on PS5 is not Astro's first game?
Astrobot Rescue Mission on the PSVR was his first full game. And I'm gonna be honest, I think this one is even better than the PS5 game. This is straight up the best VR game I have ever played. Absolutely ingenious level design coupled with some of the most charm and polish you will ever find in any game. It was constantly surprising me with fun ideas and new set pieces tailor-made for the VR experience, all the way up to the final level. Astrobot is not the only playable character in this game. You are one too. Enemies, the world around you, and of course Astrobot all react to your presence, which creates this very natural feeling symbiosis between you and the game. Playing Rescue Mission has also made me realize just how much of it was recycled for the PS5 game. Most of the level themes, characters, enemies, gameplay mechanics, and soundtrack are straight up taken from this game. I think Team Asobi was just really proud of what they made here, and thought it was such a shame that not a lot of people got to experience it. Not everything made the jump though. Exclusive to Rescue Mission are these chameleons that are hidden away in every level. You, as the player, find and spot them to unlock challenge levels. They're cleverly hidden in a way that someone could only find them if they were playing in VR. If you like video games, please play this game. It has really stuck with me since I played it, and I'm slowly starting to become okay with calling this one of the best games I have ever played. Do keep in mind though that this game requires a DualShock 4 controller to play, since it needs the backlight to track its motion. During the making of this video, I actually saw a lot of misconceptions online that you need the DualShock 4 for every single PSVR 1 game, and that's just simply not true. A majority of games that needed a regular controller for this video were played with the PS5 controller. I played Psychonauts, Resident Evil 7, Star Wars Squadrons, and Minecraft with a PS5 controller in VR and never had an issue. There's also a misconception about Skyrim VR not supporting the Move controllers, but they're totally compatible. I do actually kind of prefer playing it with a regular controller though. The Move controllers with their lack of analog sticks really aren't that fun to play with in a game like this. It's why I'm not that upset about a game like Minecraft not supporting them.
This is how it works.
As someone who's played way too much Minecraft in their life, I was really surprised by how much the game was transformed in VR. There's this extra sense of beauty and wonder to this game when you get to experience it so up close. Swimming past the fish, taking in huge scales, peeking around the corner of a dark cave, or actually looking up at the sun to see how much time you have left before night makes for a very unique way to experience this game. Mojang is dropping support for the VR mode though, and I'll probably not get this video out before they officially do. So, if you still want to play it, some physical versions of Minecraft have this mode included on the disc. Cases with the VR mode included header on the box have version 1.12 on the disc. But very recently, there was actually a reprint of Minecraft on PS4, and this version has 1.16 on the disc, including the VR mode, so this is definitely the version to get.
Feel free to take this code, by the way. I haven't used it and I never will.
Also, interesting side effect, Minecraft can feel like a horror game when you're playing it in VR. It always gave me a little jump whenever a mob came out of the darkness towards me. Virtual reality is just so intimate that even a blocky game like this can become scary all of a sudden. That's why horror games work so well in VR. Playing Resident Evil 7 in VR made me realize just how much of this game was made with this mode in mind. That is to say that this game works unbelievably well on this form and feels natural in a way. It's incredibly scary and tense. The molded were already one of the scariest enemies I had ever encountered in any game, but man, it's something else to see them come at you and tower over you like this. But it's also just so fun in this sort of haunted house at a theme park kind of way. If you're able, doing your first playthrough of this game in VR is well worth considering. That being said, this was kind of the game that made me realize the PlayStation VR really strives for simpler looking games. The resolution on the headset is a little low, and that can make some areas in high detailed games like this look a little pixelated. Again, it's not terrible though, and the game is so scary that you'll quickly be focused on something else, but a game like Moss naturally looks a little cleaner on the PlayStation VR. Moss is one of the most cinematic VR games I've ever played. I am amazed at how good the composition, lighting, and design of this entire game is. These animations are so fluid too. As an animator myself, it was such a treat to see these beautifully animated characters so up close. And ooh, is the sound design good. Playing this game with headphones is an absolute must. Really get immersed in it. Moss also has fantastic presentation. I love this fairy tale approach to the story where the narrator voices every character.
And as soon as I picked it up, something started helping me. Uncle Argus followed her motion.
Arita, with you, here.
These puzzles are also really fun. I really don't have a bad thing to say about Moss. It's a beautiful game that is sure to stick with me for a very long time. I really like how VR is not just being used for first-person type games. Sure, you as a player are usually a separate character in the story, and I guess that is sort of first-person, but I love seeing all these takes on third-person-like games. It's really cool to see a game like Ghost Giant, for example, where the developers not only experiment with third person, but also bring such an interesting and unique art style into virtual reality. The diorama look to everything is incredibly charming. I love the music, and the story, whilst initially feeling a little predictable, does something like an hour in that I thought was really clever, and I was pretty much on board after that. You get a real feeling that you're forming a little bond with this fox. I do want to give a bit of a disclaimer though, and I really don't like doing this because I thought this game was really charming and I'm rooting for it, but Ghost Giant was easily the game I had the most technical issues with whilst recording for this video. The move controllers lost calibration a lot, it can be a little choppy to play sometimes, and I needed to reposition myself almost constantly. This was also by far the game that made me the most motion sick. I'm pretty experienced with VR at this point, so I'm a little baffled that Ghost Giant was the one to do it for me. Still, I would really recommend this, even if it might be better to play on other VR platforms. Ghost Giant is an exception in that though. Lots of games still work really well on the PSVR.
Did I jump scare you?
I swear that Scott Cawthon somehow had VR in mind when he originally thought of FNAF, because this works a little too well. Help Wanted features remakes of the first 3 games, plus some extra modes from the later ones, and it's easily the best FNAF game to be. It's not even a contest. I adore that they animated the animatronics. Being really familiar with the original games, it caught me so off guard to see Freddy move towards me in the hallway of FNAF 2. I also think that some of these games just work straight up better in VR than they ever did on PC. The sequels, whilst I love them aesthetically and the sound work is phenomenal in them, I always thought that the gameplay elements were really flawed. And that's kind of what I mean when I say that these games work better in VR. The stress-inducing, frantic gameplay loop of FNAF 2 is so much better realized here. Actually reaching for the mask is so much more tense instead of just moving your mouse over it. I swear, FNAF 2 on PC feels like you're playing Osu.
I hope you die in the fire!
On top of that, Help Wanted also has some modes from the other games remade in VR. Surface Repairs is really fun and tense. The flashlight minigame works surprisingly well in VR. And the FNAF 4 one, it's actually not that great. I kinda get why they didn't fully port this game over. But holy hell, the vent repair is like the scariest thing I've ever played. Help Wanted is just great. I highly recommend it if you're into horror games. I just get a real kick out of seeing how established franchises attempt to make VR work for their games. A lot of creativity goes into it because some games just won't work for VR out of the gate. Third-person platformers, for example, need some very well planned out level and game design to properly work. Or you can just be like Psychonauts and say, screw it, we're a first-person game now. Rhombus of Ruin isn't the most loved or even talked about Psychonauts game. I'm guessing it has something to do with it only being 2 hours long. Admittedly, that is way too short, but it's still such a fun and charming game with incredibly strong art direction, really fun writing, and some neat puzzles.
Grenade out!
I think you did some damage there. In a lot of ways, it even brings Double Fine back to its roots because this can feel like one of their old point-and-click games but built in VR. Plus, it's just neat to see these characters interact with you and to actually feel like you're in this world. As a big Psychonauts fan, this did a lot for me, and I'm really happy it even exists. The Psychonauts in the Rhombus of Ruin might not be the best Psychonauts game, but it's still a really good one that I can recommend to every fan of this franchise. Crazy how this franchise doesn't have a single bad entry. What's even more crazy though is that this 2-hour experience got a physical release. And it's not like a limited run release or whatever, no, this was actually sold in stores. Which, as both a fan of physical games and Psychonauts, I'm definitely not complaining about that. I'm just really thankful that so much of the PSVR library was available physically in stores, because it got me to try different VR games that had interesting covers. Randomly bought this one day without really knowing anything about it. The robot on the cover art just looked so striking to me, and imagining standing across from it in VR, it got me all giddy. But Budget Cuts is much more than just a cool robot design, because it made me realize just how much extra tension VR adds to stealth games. The little portal gun here is so genius, and I'm actually a little surprised that I've never seen it in any other VR game. So basically, this gun shoots a bouncy ball, and wherever it lands, it creates a little portal for you to teleport to. But you don't have to teleport to it. You get a little preview window of what the area looks like, so you can spot if there are any enemies around or just take in the surroundings in general.
Oftentimes in stealth games, you have a third-person camera over the shoulder, so that you can get more information about the layout of the level and where the enemies are. But we don't have a way to do that in virtual reality because you are always first. You're always yourself. So we needed a way to create an extra camera so that the player could like get a lay of the land and then also decide or not decide if they were going to enter that location or not. When Freya came up with it, it felt almost like of course. Like the way to show you where you're going is to literally show you where you're going and then just have that be where you are. And then there's other limiting factors that we wanted to put in, like we found out that if you teleported really quickly across large spaces, it still felt like you were smooth locomotioning, so you still got that nausea. So that's why we have a physical arc to the physical ball that has to be shot out of the portal gun, so that we have a way to like limit how quickly people can move, so that we limit the nausea.
I think this mechanic is so smart and fun. The first time I realized that the robots could also see me through this portal, it kind of freaked me out. It got my mind racing over all the other possibilities that VR could add to games in this genre. Despite this game requiring the Move controllers, it's one of the few games where I straight up forgot about their limitations, and that's a big compliment towards this game. I also love how you can flick your weapon into a wall. It's a really fun way to temporarily make that hand available to open up like a door or something. Like it stayed fun all the way throughout the whole game. And again, I think these robot designs are amazing. They're just so striking to look at, and seeing one of them run up to you triggers this very primal fight or flight feeling.
The inspiration was honestly a security camera from a classic movie or something. You know how they're oblong and they have those covers on top because they're outside. But we also kind of wanted to, and this sounds really silly when you say it out loud, we wanted them to look a little bit like pregnant women. There was no sort of commentary there. It was merely when we're looking at silhouettes and shapes, we really liked this feeling of the hips being more forward, more of a round section around the hips, and then also the shoulders being more back, so the center of balance was a little bit different, and that the head was kind of what was scanning, and that the body was a little bit slower to follow the head. And so one of the things that we were thinking of there was oh, that sounds a lot like the way you see the body language change when a woman becomes pregnant, right? For instance.
You should really play this game. It has some ingenious VR mechanics, and the people who made it are absolutely lovely and well worth your support.
We have games on the PlayStation Store, we have games on Steam, we have games on Nintendo, we have games on MetaQuest and Humble. So we're just not on Xbox, but we're on PC. And we're on the Windows store. So anywhere that you can find cool games, and if you're into virtual reality or even not, you can find neat corporation games online ready to play.
So is there a chance, because if I remember correctly, Budget Cuts 2 doesn't have a physical release yet, right?
No, it doesn't.
Is there you seem really disappointed by that.
I know. Yeah, well, Budget Cuts 2 didn't really have the same market splash as Budget Cuts 1 did, so we just didn't have the like financial means and the bandwidth to make the physical disc happen. I want it to. It's really just like a matter of the means.
So everyone watching, you hear this? Buy Budget Cuts Ultimate Edition so you can get a physical release of the second game. We gotta make this happen. I can't possibly cover every single game on the PSVR. This video would be like, what, 8 hours long if I did? So I implore you to do the same thing that I did. Buy some games for the system and just start playing. PlayStation VR is a goldmine of hidden gems, so there's bound to be something here for you. PSVR also had some really cool demo discs physically released for it. Demo discs aren't really a thing anymore, and they haven't been for a long time now. So if I were to guess, these will probably be the last physical demo discs to ever be printed for a video game console. From what I've been able to gather, there are 3 official ones made by Sony, but I see some contradicting info online on how many demos are actually on these discs. Sadly, I can't confirm how many games are on each disc, because as much as I would love to have these demo discs for my collection, they weren't released in Europe. The demo discs were, of course, also available digitally for free on the PlayStation Store. In fact, this headset had a lot of free demos. The PS5 is missing a lot of them though, hence why I couldn't fact check the number of games on each demo disc. But there were a ton available on the PS4 when the system was relevant. It's not really that much of a surprise that they did this either. I found an interview with Michael Ephraim, the marketing director for the PSVR, who said,
"Our biggest challenge will be to get people demoing VR, because there's no way to sell VR until you've tried it. You can watch over the shoulder, you can read articles, but, and I mean this genuinely, everybody that I know who has tried PlayStation VR has taken off the headset with a smile and said, wow. So you've got to try it. That's the challenge."
And this demo strategy seemed to have worked. Sony said that they've sold over 5 million PlayStation VRs, which far exceeded their expectations. I just think that Sony handled it pretty well. The marketing was good, the library was strong, it's fun to try out at a friend's house, and it was relatively affordable. But suddenly, the popularity of the PlayStation VR started to disappear really quickly. Sales went down and people just weren't really talking about it anymore. Why is that? How could the system that made VR available for so many people, sold over 5 million headsets and had over 500 games released on it, be abandoned so quickly? It's because of this thing. On October 13th, 2020, the Oculus Quest 2 was released. A standalone, wireless headset with better controllers and similar level of graphical power for less money than the PlayStation VR headset sold for on its own. Almost every developer immediately jumped over to this thing and ported their games on it. On top of a good chunk of the PSVR library being made available on it, they also had really appealing exclusive games. Resident Evil 4 had a VR version release on it that was made by a lot of the ex-developers of the Metroid Prime games. And it is really good. VR chat was ported to it, which the PlayStation VR never got, likely due to the limited controllers. The Climb games had a lot of buzz around them. People wanted to try Blade and Sorcery. Bone Lab was playable on it, which I remember at the time being talked about as like the most interactive VR game ever made. Quest 2 also sported features that the PlayStation VR didn't have. Instead of setting up a camera for a playable space, you could just dictate the playable space yourself by drawing a circle around you. You're also able to see your surroundings without having to pull off the headset, which the PlayStation VR could have greatly benefited from. It can also connect to a PC, either via a cable or a wireless connection, making this headset able to play PC VR games.
The Quest 2 was the VR world's greatest duality. It was so exciting and got so many people into VR.
I was still quite in the PlayStation VR environment, and so I wasn't quite ready to leap into another platform at that point. But as the years went on, it became clear that the Quest was a legitimate platform, and it got exclusive games like Resident Evil 4 VR, which I think is one of the best VR games you can play.
And I was at Target and I was like, oh, this is cool. Okay, these are, I think it was like $300 or $400. It really wasn't that much for what it was, and it even came with Resident Evil 4, and I'm like, hell yeah, I gotta play this.
Oh, we were absolutely thrilled. Because the thing is, like, we're also consumers, right? We're also players, we're gamers. We're not just developers. So for us, having a headset that you could just walk anywhere and be anywhere, and it would work. You don't have to like set up your base stations. You don't have to plug it into a million cables.
The Quest is just a mobile chipset within a headset. There's no need for wires. You have to charge it a bit more, but that's not really a problem.
Bloop, it's on, it works.
As much as I love the PlayStation VR for its quirkiness and its physical games, the Quest 2 is just undeniably better. The Quest 2 didn't just lessen interest in the PlayStation VR, it pretty much instantaneously killed the platform. And that might have been a bad thing in the long run. The Quest 2 was so incredibly successful that it kinda changed the course of VR as a whole. And Meta, now being on top, really wanted to reshape what the future of VR was gonna look like.
Their goals recently seem to be more aligned with having people in more of their metaverse, in their Horizon Worlds spaces. So lots of smaller, digestible games that are like more free to play or easy to access because you want to go in with your friends. You don't want to have to like go out and buy the game and then make sure it works together and like all these steps to make sure that things work. They want it to just be able to play with your friends, be able to connect all the time.
But it also led to so much overhype, especially on Meta's part, where they started dumping all this money into it, and then everybody was becoming a metaverse-based company because of the success of the Quest 2. Really, it just set these unrealistic expectations that nobody could keep up with, especially with the price tag. And so it set a weird precedent that's caused the last couple years of VR to go down to a really weird place because of it.
Thankfully, Sony was already in development of their next virtual reality headset. And on February 23rd, 2023, 2.5 years after the Quest 2 came out, Sony finally released the PlayStation VR 2 for a price of $600!
You're batshit insane!
That's more expensive than the PlayStation 5 itself, which you still need, by the way. Holy hell. Thank God I already have a whole library of games I can play on this thing. They did make the PSVR 2 backwards compatible, right? Right?
No.
So you either had to buy a game again, or pray to God that the developers provided a free update for PSVR 2 users. Yo, what up? Mallard from the future here. Well, not the future that's featured in this video, but like the future me that's editing the video. Right. So I was looking up lists of like upgraded versions of PSVR 1 games that were available on the PSVR 2, which, first of all, there's not an official one. And second of all, there's a lot of games on these lists that just say, oh yeah, the only way to get these upgraded versions if you've already bought them on PSVR 1 is to contact the developer via their email. And I'm here like, what? Like Sony should have just made this system backwards compatible because this is a giant mess. Superhot is not playable. They didn't update Resident Evil 7 for it. Sony didn't even care enough to port Astro onto this thing. That's like the most famous and best PlayStation VR game. What are you doing? You can either spend $1,150 on a PlayStation VR 2 and a PS5 that doesn't support most of the PSVR 1 games, or you could go for a Quest 2 for $300. That has most of the PSVR 1 library available on top of exclusives that the PSVR 2 doesn't have. Speaking of exclusives, what did Sony even have for the PSVR 2 if they didn't make the old library of games available? Well, they did update Resident Evil 8 and Resident Evil 4 Remake months after release to be playable in VR, which is neat. But having these updates months after the games initially released isn't as exciting to me as the way Resident Evil 7 launched with it. Also, neither Sony nor Capcom really advertised this because I have friends who are massive Resident Evil 4 fans, and they straight up didn't know that this mode existed. Then we have Gran Turismo 7, which also received an update for VR. I've heard from people who played this that it looks absolutely amazing and plays incredibly well. So hey, if you're into VR racing games, this definitely seems like a killer app for the system. Sony also made Horizon's Call of the Mountain a pack-in title, which I've always seen as their answer to the Climb games on Quest 2. I played it over at someone's house and it wasn't bad, but it's not that great of a pack-in title. I just don't think that this game sells the PSVR 2 all that well.
Is that a storm bird? Just let me Dino Machine.
Humanity was made by the same developers as Tetris Effect, and whilst both games are playable in 2D, they are highly advised to be played in VR. And I've also heard great things about this one. I even saw some people call it their favorite game of 2023. The thing is, these aren't bad games at all, and the PlayStation VR 2 does have a solid enough library. But a lot of these games are also playable in 2D and were just updated for virtual reality. And on top of that, most of its games are also on the Quest or on PC VR, which at this point is becoming much more viable and affordable. The Quest also saw its sequel release only a short while after the PlayStation VR 2 launched.
Do you want to play the hero or be the hero?
Wait, I could be Batman?
Wait, you too? All the little improvements that the PlayStation VR 2 had made over the Quest 2, it didn't matter anymore. Because the Quest 3 was again just much better than the current PlayStation VR headset.
I think Quest 3 is a game changer. Quest 3 is so natural to wear, and a big part of that is pass-through. Just being able to see the real world as you go around in full color.
The Quest 3 was a pretty massive upgrade from the Quest 2, and it's hard to not recommend it to people to say, if you have the extra $200 lying around, especially back then, saying, don't go for the Quest 2, go for the Quest 3. It is a really big upgrade.
And then you get those mixed reality games as well. And the whole interface is mixed reality. You can be in your living room and just see like floating internet browsers, floating YouTube windows.
Yeah, it can handle a lot more in terms of like mesh rendering, textures, can be higher resolution.
It's just awesome as a multimedia device. But then you also get better performance in games. You get the better controllers.
It can handle more shadows, more dynamic stuff. It can also handle a lot more sophisticated interactions with like NPCs. So it is a very big step forward.
And it made PSVR 2 feel more expensive and also more dated.
I don't own a PSVR 2, but I have played it for a few hours over at someone's house, and my general impressions of it were actually very good. The image quality was really sharp. I think the new controllers are great. I still love the ring strap, and even the weight distribution was improved. Even the setup isn't complicated anymore. Though it's still a wired system, you only have to plug the wire into the front USB of the PS5, and you're done. It also has a see-through mode now, and you can set up your own barrier just like the Quest 2. You can even connect it to a PC via an adapter which was released a little over a year after launch. On face value, it's not a bad headset at all, but it just doesn't feel that innovative to me. In a lot of ways, it just feels like it's playing catch-up with the Quest 2, and it's crazy expensive. The confidence that was there during the PSVR 1 generation is almost completely lost.
I mean, it's definitely better than the first one. Like, it fixes all the problems. The only problem is there's nothing to play on it.
The beauty of PSVR 1 was it was fairly affordable for a VR headset, like comparative to other headsets. With PSVR 2, it was more than the console was, which felt like too much of an investment.
PlayStation VR 2 requiring you to have an entire console dedicated to it is just way out of budget for a lot of people, but the headset itself was very innovative, especially when it comes to haptics and whatnot.
And they also just started the ecosystem from scratch, so all those PS4 games just didn't work on PSVR 2. And I think you can argue now that PSVR 1 probably has the better library overall. So even though it's higher quality as a VR experience, I just felt no need to get one.
I've got a few different games. I've played Tetris Effect. I played the Horizon game, but outside of that, there's just not much. Like I really don't know why Sony made the second VR headset when they have like no hardware for it. It reminds me of the PS Vita. They made the Vita and made like 5 games for it, and then that was it.
What happened, at least what we saw happen, was for PSVR 1 on the PlayStation 4, there was a lot more momentum and a lot more belief and trust and investment and games being made, and even PlayStation and Sony had way more excitement. And we were really happy to hear that PSVR 2 was being made and came out with the PS5. However, it feels like there was an internal department or a person who was really excited about the PSVR 2 and made sure that that happened at Sony. But then it launched and there was not the follow through afterwards of making sure that there's highlighted virtual reality games on the storefront. There's not as much publishing or like promotion of virtual reality games. They kind of launched it and then went in a different direction, and it kind of feels a little like a little sad, like you lost the wind out of the sails, because the PSVR 1 was such a huge boost for the industry, and it's so great to not just be like one platform that is taking over everything. We want a lot of different ones that offer different things, that try different things out, because we're still so early in it that we want to find out what works best for players. And PlayStation gamers are those kind of medium core gamers, right? You're not mobile phone gamers and casual, but you're invested. I think it's a really important market that needs to continue to thrive. But I'm a little like hoping that maybe somebody at PlayStation or Sony like really starts believing in PSVR 2 again and starts like pushing and promoting more of that content, because there are good games there. You know, they're really great, and we can have so many more if there's just this like collaboration between the hardware and the software, which I think we're seeing more of with Meta. And also Android now as well, which is really exciting. And Steam has just updated a bunch of things on their storefront to make like finding VR games easier and faster, and like checking out early on like what's the frame rate like, what's the quality like. So I think they're definitely considering the VR gamer experience there as well. So I would love to see something similar from PlayStation. So shout out to Sony.
As I was working on this video, something interesting happened. Sony drastically reduced the price of the PlayStation VR 2 from $600 to $400. It is now the exact same price as the PSVR 1 was when it launched. I still fear that it might be a little too late, and this could even signal that the end is near for the PlayStation VR, but hell, I might be completely wrong about that. And maybe this creates the comeback that Sony has been wanting for this system. I'm still not that interested in getting one, to be honest, because even with the price cut, it's such a deal breaker to me that it can't play PSVR 1 games. Maybe I'll get it one day just to have it, collect some of the physical games that were released for it, and I don't know, maybe use it as a PC VR device, because again, the headset itself is really good. My ultimate hope here is that someday the modding community will figure out how to play PSVR 1 games on it. You probably still need the Move controllers for the games that require them, but that's not a huge downside to me. A future where PSVR 1 games are playable by just plugging in a PlayStation camera and a PSVR 2 without having to deal with the extra processor unit would be the ultimate dream for me. Because I love the PlayStation VR, and I personally think it's going to hit cult status soon. There is never going to be another virtual reality system like it ever again. It was in a very unique position in a very specific moment in time. The PlayStation VR is one of the best time capsule consoles out there, and despite the many problems this thing has, I can still wholeheartedly recommend it. It's such a unique, fun, and endearing experience that I absolutely love. The Quest 2 is definitely the more impressive headset, and launched the medium of VR into the mainstream more than PlayStation ever did. But you gotta remember that a lot of the games on here started out as PSVR titles. They were developed because a titan of the industry was willing to give VR a chance. The PlayStation VR gave developers the experience of making VR games for hardware that wasn't just high-end PCs. It introduced over 5 million people outside of the hardcore PC VR players to the world of VR and became a great stepping-in point. The PSVR walked so that the Quest 2 could run, sort of thing. Quest 2, because you earlier you said like that was a lot harder to develop for.
Yeah.
Did that take more time to port to Quest 2 than the game took to port to PlayStation?
No, we were able to use a lot of the same tools for both, and a lot of the same like tricks, if you call it that, ways that we cleverly make the levels more performative or more optimized, because a lot of the limitations are the same. It usually comes down to how much memory you can cache at a single moment, and then also it's a lot to do with just the rendering itself, like being able to render so many cameras and so many shaders at one single time. I definitely think it was good. It was really good practice for a lot of us, especially when then going over to Quest and being like tied to a mobile headset environment, which was even more demanding on developers. I think this was like the wake-up call that we needed of like, okay, you can't just play around with the best high-end PCs. Like, we have to make this work for everybody, and that's a partnership between the people building the hardware and the people building the software, right? Really, to make virtual reality exciting and accessible for everybody.
So as I was working on this video, because this was originally just like, oh, I like the PlayStation VR and I want to talk about it. And then as I did more research, I kind of started seeing this narrative of, hey, the PlayStation VR kind of was the first moment that a lot of big companies were willing to give a chance on VR. I wonder if the PlayStation VR did a lot more for the whole world of VR and VR development than people realize.
I think it did a huge amount. The thing is, like, there's so many steps in the history of VR that just came too early or too soon. And I think PlayStation VR was a little bit like I'm super happy it happened. It did wonders. But I think it coming out, PlayStation VR on PS4, and then a lot of like AAA companies and bigger corporations funding projects to come out on there, I think they tried really early, but they didn't have any internal expertise to make VR games good, so they were making a lot of the mistakes that we had learned from.
Do you think PlayStation VR is salvageable?
I think it could definitely see a second life or like a resurgence or something. I definitely think that. I think it depends largely on when we get the next PlayStation console. Maybe the PSVR 2 will work on the PlayStation 6 and that'll be a reboot. Maybe it won't and it'll fall away. Maybe it'll get PSVR 3 and that'll be a whole new, like, I don't know, but I think it could.
So if you have any interest in physical games or just have a fascination with old technology in general, the PlayStation VR is a great system to get. And maybe someday the PlayStation VR 2 will be worth getting as well. Even though it's looking grim right now, I'm still rooting for its success. And boy was he right, because as we all know, after the price cut, the PSVR 2 became the best-selling console of all time. And then came the PSVR 3, which of course everybody on the planet now uses in their daily lives after it became government mandate to own one in the year 2072. It really was just that wire that held the PSVR 2 back from world domination. Thank you so much for making it through the whole video. This was a massive project to put together, and I want to give one final thanks to everyone involved. Thank you, Linnea, for letting me interview you. Your insight was absolutely incredible, and the video just wouldn't have been the same without you. I also want to thank the people over at Meat Corporation who helped make this interview possible. Specifically, Marco and Emma. Without them, this would have never happened, so I want to sincerely thank them. A big thanks to Cosmic Matt for voicing the Michael Ephraim bit. A big thank you to my brother Mark, who helped me with filming. And a big thank you to John Cartwright, Fia, and Nathaniel Bandy for letting me interview them about their experiences with the PlayStation VR and the Quest.
Hi, I'm Nathaniel Bandy. I do Nintendo videos online. If you want to follow me, just look up my name, and that's it.
If you go to my YouTube channel, The Virtual Reality Show, that's where all my in-depth deep dives are. You can also check out my Discord, discord.gg/Fia, and we answer all sorts of VR-related questions if you're interested in getting more into VR chat or the headset technologies. So those are the best places to check me out, along with my Twitter, Fia_Bunny.
Hi, I'm John, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnComs, on Instagram at JohnComs, and on Blue Sky at john.gvg.io. What's a GVG, you may say? That's my YouTube channel, where I talk about games and things like Nintendo, and Mario, who's also Nintendo, and other things. That's where I am. You can also find me in the real world sometimes, on the streets. Not all the time, though, and only in specific places.
If you want to support the channel, I have recently opened memberships, but you can also just share the video around with your friends and stuff. It helps out a ton. Again, one final time, thank you so much for watching the video, and I hope to see you next time.
I've got a joystick, I've got a helmet. That's right, and you just put the helmet on like that. Right. And of course you see that you have a gun in your hand, and to fire the gun, you simply press the trigger. And I'll get in and join you.
Okay. Come into my world, John.
Linked by a computer that tracks our individual motions, Waldron and I are now both inside the same electronic world.